Bearing in mind what was said in that last video, let's go ahead and just reinforce what you already know. When you take an object, and this is a symbol we've made, and drag it over here into the swatches, we then create an automatically generated pattern that puts whatever was dropped in, whatever the symbol is, as close together as possible without overlapping. So if you have an irregularly shaped object, you're going to get a little different result here, but it's always going to respect the rectangle, or in this case the square, around whatever was selected as the pattern. So that's the default. If you want anything different, you select this and then make it a pattern, right? And then once again, I'm just going to change this, in order to spread this out a little bit, and click done. And then with our rectangle selected, and like I said, we're going to present these differently when we upload them to the journal. So if you've already uploaded some, that's fine. We'll just know we're going to have a more efficient and effective way to do this so that when we do some of this stuff I'm going to show you in a minute, it's not affecting some of the other patterns. So now what we want to do is take this one more time to make it polka dots that kind of alternate, right? And we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to change this grid to brick by row. And you might be thinking, what does the rest of this do? Well, a lot of it depends on the shape you have, and different pattern tiles work better. And you see, this is, perhaps you like this. Perhaps you don't want to change this next number. But just to be consistent, I'm going to go ahead and change that and go ahead and click done. And then click here and add that new pattern. Now, if you want a polka dot pattern with smaller dots, do you make a new symbol that's smaller? Well, that's one way. Or with this, now I've selected a rectangle. The fill of that rectangle is a pattern. So under Object, Transform, we can go down to Scale. And when this comes up, 200 was the last thing I used scale for, so I'm going to change this to 100 and just click, make sure that Transform Objects is off, okay, because that transforms our rectangle, and we never want that. Don't worry about scale corners for now, but Transform Patterns, and we're just going to click OK. That made no change whatsoever, because this is the size we have. Now we're going to come back up to Object, Transform, and Scale, and this time change this to, say, 50, and hit Tab. Now, there's a gotcha here. If I click OK, and then I decide I want it just a little bit smaller, well, what do you think happens when we go up to Object, Transform, and Scale? Well, once again, it remembers the last setting. So you didn't get it a little bit smaller, you got it 50% of the 50%. So you can just change this to maybe 80%, hit Tab, and you dial in the size you want. Oh, but I want these dots further apart. Well, you can make a new pattern, or you can double click on the pattern tile, which opens up the pattern options, which allows you to spread these a little farther apart. And then you click done, and oh, lo and behold, we've lost our size, right? Well, no problem, right? Object, Transform, and Scale. And then this time, instead of 80%, we'll go down to maybe 30%. And let's just say that's perfect. And you might have noticed under Object Transform, there are other options here. Some of these will work better than others. Some of these aren't made for patterns. The Rotate, if you don't want your pattern traveling perfectly horizontal and vertically. You see that this dot is repeated here and here and here, but there's also this other row that's going on. And if you look, you'll see other collections of linear repeats that happen throughout the pattern. So just know you've got all of these options, and remember, presentation, there'll be another mission about making smaller rectangles on a single artboard, not working with all of these artboards, so we can save out one artboard with multiple patterns organized in a visually pleasing way, because presentation matters, right? Right. And doesn't this bother you? Look at these little polka dots you can see right there. And look at the edges. You can always move this and present, well, not you can, you should. I want your patterns presented nicely. But again, don't load up your portfolio with these huge blocks of patterns. Okay, you can put a couple there and say you made 12, and you're waiting for Scotchko to show you how to present 12 of them effectively, rather than filling up the journal with, like I said, big slabs of patterns.